Welcome back everyone. Now in this lecture, we will learn how to receive data from the user. That is, inputting data from the user. In our previous lecture, we just printed out some values onto the output screen. In this lecture, we will be actually receiving data from the user. That's very exciting, right? This lecture contains a lot of new concepts. So I want you guys to pay extra attention because the things we learn in this lecture will be used throughout this course. Okay, so let's get started. Now, the best part about Java is that it does a lot of work for us. It has something called a scanner. Now, what scanner basically does, as the name suggests, it scans something. Now, what does it scan? It scans for the user input. That basically means we can use something called a scanner to receive input from the user. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's get started. Now, to use a scanner, just like any other variable, we need to make use of the variable concept we learned in our previous lesson. So to make a scanner, go ahead and type scanner. Now, just like when creating variables, our scanner should have a name. Let's call it scanner1. Okay. Now this scanner will store the input from the user. So to do that, we type in new followed by scanner again, and inside opening and closing brackets, we type in what we need to scan. Now what do we need to scan? We need to scan whatever the user enters into the output screen, right? So how do we do that? If you remember back when we had to print something onto the output screen, we use system.out. Now this time we need to read from the user or read from the output screen. So we use system.in. Now in stands for input. Now what basically this line of code does is that we create a scanner called scanner1 which scans for the system input, that is the user input. We end the line with a semicolon. Very cool, right? Now what you need to understand is that now if you look at this line, you can see there is an error. The red line under suggests that there is some problem with this line of code. What is it? Let's try running this. Now, if we take a look at our error message, we can see that our Java does not identify scanner. Now, I just told you that Java has done a lot of work for us. Now, Java is saying it doesn't know what scanner is. So what do we do? To fix this, we need to tell Java what scanner is. Now, how can we fix this issue? To do that, go to this little bulb-like icon here. If you click on that, now you can see that add import for java.util.scanner. Select that, and you can see that the error message, the error line is no longer there. Why is that? Now we just basically added this line of code, import java.util.scanner. Now what this line does is that it tells Java what scanner is. Now by default, Java has no idea what scanner is. But as we import java.util.scanner, it tells Java scanner is this and it will do this. So without importing java.util.scanner, Java cannot use scanner. Now we will learn more about import functions later in this course. For this moment, all you need to know is that for scanner to work, we need to tell Java what scanner is, and that is what we did with the help of import java.util.scanner. Alright. Now until now, we made a scanner variable called scanner1 which stores the user input. Okay, Now our next step is to use that user input, right? So we'll do that with the help of a little example. Now what we'll do in this example is that we will receive a number from the user and we will print that number. Very simple, right? First, let us tell the user what they have to do. So we'll do that with the help of a simple system.output message .println. Now next step is to store that number, right? Now how do we store that number? The first thing is that we know it's a number. So let's make a variable to store that value. So what data type will the variable have? We just told that it's a number. So let's just use the integer data type. And we'll call the variable number. Now this number will store the value of the number entered by the user. Okay? Now how do we do that? We'll have to use our scanner. Now scanner contains the input, right? The input user will enter will be stored in the scanner. So we had to store that into our number variable so that we can actually use that value. So how do we do that? So to do that, we equalize our number variable to scanner1, which is our scanner variable name, followed by the dot operator, and list came up. Now from this, if you observe next int, now you can see the definition of next int scans the next token of the input as int. Let's select that. Okay. So what this line of code does is that the next integer you enter into the output screen will be saved into number. Now how do we save it to number? With the help of the scanner we just created. Now the scanner scans the output screen. As soon as we enter an integer, the scanner will collect that integer and store it to number. Simple as that. We end this line with a semicolon. So far what we did is we create a scanner which receives input from the user, and we used the next int function to store an integer that we enter into the output screen into a variable called number. Okay, our next step is just to print that number, which is very simple. You can pause the video and try printing out that number. Okay, I'll show you how to do it. System.out.println the number you entered is system dot, oops, we missed an S right here, dot out dot println. Now this time we'll be printing the actual variable value. So to print the variable value we had to use the variable name. Voila. So what this basically does is that it scans for the user input, and as soon as it receives an integer value, it stores that into number, is later printed back onto the output screen. Simple, right? Now let's try running this program. We hit run, enter a number. Let's enter something called 45. Voila, the number you entered is 45. It's working perfectly. Okay, so far I hope it's clear, but now you must be wondering, okay, this is fine for when I'm receiving an integer, but what if I wanted a floating point value or a double value? It is very simple. Now, if we wanted to receive a double value, instead of the integer number, we'll be creating a double number variable, and instead of receiving the next integer, we'd be actually needing the next double value, right? So instead of next int, we search for our replacements. Let's see that list again. Scanner dot. Okay, if you look at this list, you can see next double, next float, next byte, next boolean. I hope you got the idea. If you want an integer next, if you want to store the next integer, use next int. If you want to store the next double value, use next double. If you want to store the next byte value, use next byte. If you want to store the next boolean value, use next bool. If you want to store the next boolean value, we use the next boolean. In this case, we want to store the double value, so we'll use next double. end the line with semicolon. Now let's run this to make sure it's working properly. That's 65.893. The number you entered is 65.893. The program is working perfectly. Now last but not the least, in case you wanted a text instead of numbers, what you need to do is first make the variable of string data type. Now string is basically the data type we use for text, and instead of next double, we need to actually receive the next line of text, right? So we'll be using the next line. Instead of next int or next double, we'll be using next line. Now this receives the next line of text. It can be a number, it can be anything, but it will be stored as a string. That is a collection of characters, or basically text. Now what next line will do is that it will store the next line of text into our variable. Let's change this to text and print line text. Okay, so let's make a little bit modifications. Enter the next line. The line you entered is, the text you entered is. So we make some slight modifications and run this again. Enter the next line, and you can see that it got printed again saying the text you entered is, hey, Java's fun. Awesome, right? So let's do a short summary of what we just learned. We created a scanner which scans for what the user enters, and we use the scanner variable name .next, whatever data type we are using, to store the user input value onto a variable, and then later we use that variable by printing it out onto the output screen. It's very simple, right? Now you'll get a better idea of all this as we make and write more programs. Now this syntax may be very difficult for you to learn if you're trying it for the very first time. Practice makes it perfect. Okay, so that is all about this lecture. In our next lecture, we will learn more cool things about Java. Until then, have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching. Bye.